brahmanas, and yet another eating the remnants of food left by the brahmanas. Purport. The 5 Mahayagyas, or great sacrifices, are defined as follows: reciting the Vedas, offering oblations into the sacrificial fire, that's 2, waiting on guests, that's 3, making offerings to the 4 fathers, that's 4, and offering a share of one's food to living entities in general. Mahayagyas. Purport. This is now quoting Prabhupada from Krishna book on this section. In another palace, Krishna was found performing the Pancha Yagya sacrifice, which is compulsory for a householder. This is the Nitya Karma, which a householder is supposed to do every day. Every day, every day, every day. Pancha Yagya. This yagya is also known as Pancha Suna. So here's the explanation. Knowingly or unknowingly, everyone, specifically the householder, is committing 5 kinds of sinful activities. For example, when we receive water from a water pitcher, we may kill germs that are in it. Similarly, when we use a grinding machine, like, making spices, grinding mortar, we kill or take foodstuffs, we kill many germs. While sweeping the floor, or while igniting a fire, we may kill many germs. When we walk on the street, we kill many ants or other insects. Consciously or unconsciously, in all our different activities we are killing. Therefore, it is incumbent upon every householder to perform the Pancha Suna sacrifice to rid himself of the reactions of such sinful activities. Now, Prabhupada never taught us to do this, because it's Sarvadharmam Parityaja. So these things, maybe they were being done by Krishna to teach people in general, these are duties to be performed. But for a transcendentalist Vaishnava, they're not needed to be done. But there are some things that are needed to be done by a transcendentalist Vaishnava, and that includes charity, like Bhaktisiddhanta was instructing. No, to one's capacity. Sri Radhika, a devotee in Chicago, was sharing something that when they went to Vrindavan to attend the yatra, and they spent some time in some villages. I don't know exactly how that happened, but the places where they went, she was indicating the room in which 5 people lived, like they did everything, is a space like this size. They slept there, they kept their clothes there, they did everything, very intimate. And that was it. And they were poor. But when they came, when she and her husband and 2 boys came, immediately, they were so gracious. They received them. They gave them cloth. They gave them ornaments. Because they're poor. What do they have? But whatever they have, that's just their culture. They wanted to offer meal, and however simple it was, just because of culture. Householders that have proper culture. So it's not just that. Something like that may be done by a karma kanda person. They would give something to get 10 times back, kind of calculation. Or a transcendentalist may give something because this is my duty. It's my swadharma as a householder, and I do it because I know it's pleasing to Krishna. And the happiness of such a person making that sacrifice is altogether different than the one who's doing because they're going to get 10 times back. It's a whole other experience. So the topic is the ideal family life. Continuing. Final paragraph. A grihastha should not be very much attached to his wife, semicolon. He should engage even his own wife in serving a guest with all attention. Same sentence. Whatever money a grihastha accumulates by the grace of God, he should spend in 5 activities. This is these same Mahayagya ones. Worshipping the Supreme, receiving Vaishnavas and saintly persons, distributing prasad to the general public and to all living entities, offering prasad to his forefathers, and also offering prasad to his own self. Last. Here's a Prabhupada story. Prabhupada said, there's a disciple of Prabhupada named Chandrasekhar, different than the one from Australia. And when he became married, the next day there was a morning walk. I've heard Chandrasekhar tell this story 3 times. Right at the beginning of the walk, Prabhupada, what's the duty of a householder? Prabhupada. Every morning before you take your meal, you stand at your doorway and call out 3 times. Anyone who's hungry, please come and take your meal. And after everyone is sumptuously fed, then you can take your meal. Chandrasekhar thought Prabhupada didn't understand his question. So he asked it again, and the way just before the walk ended, Prabhupada gave exactly the same answer. And I was once telling this story, the duty of the householder story from Prabhupada to a young disciple. And the person in the audience started, it looked like they were convulsing. I thought they were having a medical problem. So I stopped, and are you okay? And they started crying and said, it's just like that. When I grew up in a village, that's exactly what my father did. And so many years later, went back to the same village. There was an old man, and my father would make sure that the old man got fed before he would take his meal, and he was maintaining that old man. And the old man is there no longer, and people don't do that anymore. It's like culture is lost. No, it's not everywhere culture is lost. Like Sri Radhika was describing, simple people. Not all simple people have maintained culture, but some wealthy people maintain culture too. But it's a little more challenging to have wealth and maintain culture, because pride commonly goes with wealth, and culture goes for a walk. It fades. So these are instructions. So there's the 5. Grihastha should always be ready to worship everyone as mentioned above. That's the 5. The grihastha should not eat anything not offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The grihastha should also visit the holy places of pilgrimage mentioned in the Puranas. In this way, he should fully engage in worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now he's circling back to the very first point. For the benefit of the family, his society, his country, and humanity at large. Now there's more details that were there within the chapter. When I was on the plane from Chicago to Houston, I was searching, because I recall somewhere this, Pancha Yagya statement in Bhagavad Gita, but I couldn't find it. So I called Radhakrishna. You teach, maybe you can find it. So what he did is he prepared a whole, not just the chapter summary that we just went through, but he went through the whole chapter and picked out main points, because he's Radha Krishna. So I think I can. Who should I make a copy of this available? I'll make a copy of it available to you, and you can distribute to the people that are here. So it's more detail. Must live a simple life, parentheses, externally agree to suggestions by relatives, but internally remain simple. Hari Parshad Prabhu refers to a particular verse. He calls it the yes man verse. When people make suggestions, a polite Vaishnava will smile and say yes, and not necessarily act on it. Rather than getting in disputes, petty arguments over something that's more important is the relationship than, it's not just being deceitful. But people that may want you to be something you're not, or to do something that you're not, you can be defiant and say, that's not me. There may be times when that's required. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave similar instruction to Raghunath Das. You know that pastime? Raghunath Das was the son of one of the wealthiest families in all of India at the time. Birla or Tata or something family. They had a different last name, Majumdar. He wasn't interested. He was the only son, not the eldest son, the only son. He was to inherit everything. He was not interested. He wanted to be with Lord Chaitanya. He met with Lord Chaitanya once, and I don't want this. And Lord Chaitanya said, I want to be with you. And he said, don't be so foolish. Go back, behave as if you're an attached person, but inwardly cultivate attachment to Krishna. This is this introspection as opposed to the extravagant. He didn't say indulge yourself. He just said act as if you're part of the worldly scene, but inwardly you to cultivate your attraction for Krishna. And it took him higher and higher, and he did that for the rest of his life. There's a detailed description. His father and uncle were representatives of the Muslim ruler, Pathan ruler. And so they had a big territory for collecting taxes on behalf of the king. But he was bypassing the king's man. So rather than giving what the go-between, the tax collector of the king would do, he just gave directly to the king what that man would give, and he kept extra. He took a cut from this other tax collector fellow. So the tax collector was on his case. And he came to arrest his father and uncle. They heard he was coming, so they disappeared. And in short, Raghunath Das dealt with the tax collector fellow in such a way, his heart melted. He made a nice, peaceful solution instead of his father and uncle having to hide out for the risk of their life or be put in jail or something. In other words, he was materially competent in worldly affairs. He just had no attraction. One should perform this is more detail in the chapter. Perform sacrifices to worship the Supreme Lord. Better than sacrifices is the worship of brahmanas. The Lord is most pleased when brahmanas are fed, first to brahmanas and to demigods before other living entities. Anyway, we'll circulate this document. Any discussion? Yes.
Maharaj, thank you for the
It's subjective. Yeah. Yatarham, according to suitability. There's remote people, so that those remote people can hear the question, you can speak.
So how does one decide what is yadarham for individual case? You were talking over the winter retreat about Sanatan Goswami wearing the chadar, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not approve of it.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not approve of
Sanatan Goswami wearing the chadar.
No, I didn't. That's not what I spoke about over the winter retreat.
You were talking about the personalities from Chaitanya Charitamrita.
I didn't speak, but I didn't speak about the quilt pastime.
Okay.
That came much earlier. I was speaking during the winter retreat. I was speaking primarily about the pastime of his having sores by traveling through the Jharkhand forest.
Maybe I got mixed up. But during one of your classes recently, you spoke about.
Well, during one session, I covered the 6 Goswamis one by one by one. And by the way, tomorrow's Gopal Bhatta Goswami's appearance, so we'll speak about him tomorrow.
Sure. Man.
So now, as far as the quilt, he didn't approve
of the quilt.
The quilt
that he was wearing. So my question is, how does one decide what level of austerity is right?
It has everything to do with your. Let's use one word. That which is sustainable. How much should you eat? How little should you eat? How much should you sleep? How little should you sleep? What resource should you maintain as a balance? What's more than what's... So, according to suitability, means at different levels of spiritual progress, one's needs may diminish. At a lower level of spiritual progress, one's needs, what one senses as one's need, may be greater. So when there's stability, that's the litmus test, or the variable. Sustaining yourself, sustaining your vow and your practice and your consciousness and your relationships and so forth and so on.
If you're okay, I have a follow-up question. There is, and the way I understand it is, there is no limit to austerity as such. One can explore the depths of austerity, but when you say that whatever is sustainable, isn't that again on the one does one not run the risk of complacency?
Sure.
Thinking that okay,
sure.
This is.
So, thank you for that. What is sustainable has everything to do with the enthusiasm, let's say, that we don't become stale, is that there's some ongoing enthusiasm to progress towards Krishna. So, like this devotee, he would regularly give stuff away. Then during the course of the year, he'd accumulate more stuff. Then he would give stuff away. And in 1 year may give more stuff away, 1 year he may give less stuff away, thinking, well, these things are essential. So it has everything to do with, sustainability has everything to do with what your Krishna consciousness is. Let's say your enthusiasm to reach the goal. It's just like japa or anything. Coming before the deity, or hearing Srimad Bhagavatam discussion, or anything. Your enthusiasm towards pleasing Krishna is everything. And sometimes it's greater, sometimes it's lesser. So it's going to, there's a sliding scale. It is subjective. But sustainable is over a period of time. And then over a period of time, what's your enthusiasm level of Krishna consciousness? And you always want to make it increase.
Thank you much.
It's a good qualifying question. I like that question. Anyone else? You have something? No? Okay.
So Guru Maharaj, in the beginning of the class, you mentioned about, or how I understood is, it's not an artificial process where we artificially think this is not mine. It's all Krishna. Everything belongs to Krishna, including wife, children, and everything that you accumulate. But at the same time, being in this conditioned life, it's a challenge to remember at every step.
Yes.
So is this the right understanding, that this is a gradual process, it's
Yes.
not artificial,
Yes.
and it will come over time, but we have to continue to...
Well, we have to have faith and we have to persevere, and then it'll come about over time. It's not mechanical. There's no guarantee that, like a vending machine, it's not a guarantee. But depending upon the bhakti driving our efforts with faith, sustained over time, then there's assuredness that one will move away from the material affinity and more towards attachment to Krishna.
So this means this most likely is not one lifetime affair.
Well, it can be, but it most likely has everything to do with how strong is our hankering. Lolium, that there's a price, and one has to be prepared to pay the price. And if one isn't prepared to pay the price, one is satisfied being, I'm okay, you're okay. The pain has diminished to some degree, and at least it's acceptable level of, pain. Or turmoil or whatever, uncertainty. It generally is more than one lifetime, but it doesn't have to be. Prabhupada would encourage us by saying, in the end, this lifetime, go back to Godhead. Why not properly? Why misuse this gift? And misuse is something like Gopalkamar's idea, that he would be disrespecting his guru if he didn't achieve what the purpose of his mantra was. I don't want to disrespect my guru. So that's a nice way to think about it. Largely, people want, ending the misery of material existence and achieving freedom from material existence, or moksha. So to get to the stage where that isn't one's aspiration anymore, that's very rare, really rare. So more than one lifetime affair, yeah, usually. But not at all necessarily. So a lot depends on following these prescriptions that are meant, like hearing regularly, and trying to serve those from whom one is hearing regularly. Knowing that Krishna will be pleased by that. And Krishna is pleased by that. And then when Krishna is pleased, then coverings get removed, etc. One gets newer and newer realization.
3 points when you
Three?
speak was reinstate those points that I read earlier, was how the advanced self-realized persons shows the indifference. Was that one time I read from Servant of Servant that Prabhupada was traveling and they went to Hyderabad. And at that time, 71, it says the number 4th richest state of India. And they stay with the richest man for a couple of days. And they were serving in the silver plates. The servant was serving them. And after right away from the Hyderabad, they came to Mayapur and he mentioned Tamal Krishna Maharaj to buy the property and build the hut. So when they built the hut, when Prabhupada went there, he said, this is very peaceful situations. So we can see it that the elevated personality, they utilize also when opulence come, but they didn't become attached. The other point also was like you were saying about, do we think that becoming a Vaishnava, that should we not help other people? So that was the incident. I think they were visiting the temple. And
Which temple?
that I don't know the
Some
details.
temple.
Some, yes. So Prabhupada used to carry the coins, 5 paisa, 10 paisa, something, change, to give to the
Poor people.
hungry people front in the temple. But then they ask Tamal Krishna Maharaj Prabhupada that how do we know whom to give that donations? And Prabhupada says that don't give it to the beggar who is asking you the money, but give the donation to the person who is self-satisfied sitting, not demanding anything. To those person you do give the donation like that. And the third point was you were also saying that we can't follow all the rules and regulations like what the Panchkarma and all other vidhis as a Gruhastha.
Pancha Yagya.
So similarly, I think in one of the class, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was saying that Prabhupada didn't insist at all the 64 qualities what Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Devotion.
Yeah.
But he was mainly focused for the 5 as the main prominent that he said. So that was really reinstate those things in your talk.
Nice.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In the beginning it talked about the Varna and Ashram, and based on the nature, Guru would instruct the disciple to
In
choose.
both those areas.
Yeah. So in context of the modern economic situation, this modern work and everything that makes life quite complex, and my question is, shouldn't like spiritual institution encourage or to establish that kind of system where people can really engage or they can be engaged according to their nature, so it can become peaceful and life where they can really focus on the goal.
You're asking what sounds like a theoretical question, but it's not. You're just repeating what as far as I can hear, you're repeating what Prabhupada wanted us to do. So, what's the question? Is there a question? You're just seeking verification?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about that? Like
About which?
About this, meaning finding the proper work for each person, like how they should be engaged. Otherwise, this modern economic situation seems like quite difficult, where people can advance in spiritual life easily.
There's different approaches for different teachers. Let's take 2 extremes. One extreme is the teacher says, do this. And then the other extreme is the teacher helps the student discover what's meaningful for them and the way to fulfill that which is meaningful for them. It's not like this is right and that's wrong, or vice versa. There's different approaches. An approach that my understanding, or my preference, let's say, my preference is the second one. You know, if the teacher is super qualified, they can see, and then based upon seeing, they'll give some resources, and they'll see how the student or the young person engages with the resources, and that, you know, it may or may not confirm what they understand their nature is, and then just supply further resources in that direction, as opposed to just saying, this is your nature. I'll give an example. There's a devotee I know who attended a Gurukul where the teacher said to his brother, you're this, and said to him, you're that. And it didn't match either of their natures. But they were engaged according to what he said their nature was. So they did it. But then, you know, because it wasn't their nature, they felt some resentment toward the teacher and some resentment toward the activity that they were engaged in that was actually good for them. But, you know, just that only because that's their nature, it didn't leave a good taste. So something of a balance. And then road testing a little bit, give some further resources. And then when someone, the aptitude towards this or towards that, when someone's doing something that they really like, then little resource, you'll be well utilized. I won't mention a name, but there's one young boy that was trying to find himself. And so one of the things that he did, because he was a Hare Krishna devotee, he would sit in class and make drawings. So he's now going to college and becoming a graphic designer. And he's a really good drawer, but he also has skills in putting together graphic design. And that, you know, are mom and dad going to see that when he's a little boy? But, you know, he went through just trying this and testing that, and so, and now he's really happy. He's a very wholesome, happy person, and very talented. So, it's not, you know, there's not a cookie cutter way to decide, but there's principles. Propensity. It's kind of like, you know, the child hears the book, here's the coin. Which one do they go for? That kind of thing. And then nurture whatever that is. Resources to assist in this or that. Most important, aside from, you know, psychophysical nature and all that stuff, is character and attachment to the Supreme. Those are far more challenging in terms of teacher or parenting, Brahmana or parent's role. Anyone else? Okay, Srila Prabhupada. Oh, you have something? Online. Thank you for reminding me.
From Acharya Ratnadas. How grihastha devotees to manage the situation when materialistic wife do not cooperate with the husband's process of devotional life?
This is a Grahasta counseling question. My sense, because I'm not a Grahasta, my sense is you can catch more bees with honey than with vinegar. That is, rather than being judgmental and you're not this and why aren't you that, and just be an example of a good husband or wife, a good spouse. Try your best to be that good example, be example-setting person, and being quite tolerant because the other person has a different interest. And if the other person feels unaccepted, you're going to get a pushback. And if they're feeling accepted for who they are, then at least there's an opportunity for moving towards light instead of being, going further into darkness. And you should have thought of those things before you got married. Yes, we have something in the back here. All the way.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. As you were talking about renunciation, I was thinking about and reflecting on the qualities that I need to renounce. And one of the ones that came to mind was gossiping. And this is just a little background on the question. My main question is, what's the difference between inquiring confidentially and exposing one's mind confidentially, out of the 6 loving exchanges, and gossiping? And how can one move from the platform of gossiping to really being on the platform of a loving exchange when building a relationship?
Well, if you have
a
a simple answer to a delicate question is have at least one person or more than one person who is close to you and is wise, and they know that they can tap you on the shoulder or bang on your head or whatever is needed if you start going in the toxic direction. So it's just like a mirror that can transparently show you what your blind spots are, and they don't have to have a hammer. They just have to be your friend and wise. So then that's a good beginning, and you can let them know. Put it on the bulletin board to your relationship with them. This is an area that I think I need some help with. So if you see me doing something in my relationship with you, I'm encouraging you. I'm not just inviting, I'm encouraging you. Please, remind me, or please show me my blind spot. And start there.